I spoke to a lot of people again over the weekend, and that's what I try to do. I try to listen to people that might think differently than me. I try to listen to people maybe that, don't know what it's like to be living as a black man in America. I try to learn. That's what I try to do. I listen to my friends who I trust, and I try to learn. And then I came up with some own conclusions, and I'm going to read this off, and I'm just going to be honest with you all. I'm going to read these two statements, and if nobody, JD, including you, if nobody agrees with this, if there are people out there that disagree with these two statements that I'm about to read, then I have no hope for America. I really have no hope. So I'm going to read these two statements. I think they're very logical. They're not politically motivated, and I think they're very fair. And I will ask you, JD, hopefully, I'm really crossing my fingers on this one, that we can agree on these two statements. Here they go. Number one. There are some bad cops out there, but the majority of cops are good cops. Let's make some changes to get the bad policing off the streets. JD, do you agree with that statement?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, good.
And,
now,
hold on. I would apply that statement to every single profession in the United States of America.
Good. I'm glad you agree on that. Now, here's the second statement, and it's regarding BLM. There are some violent radicals taking advantage of the BLM movement, but the majority of those who are a part of the BLM movement are nonviolent good people. Let's do what we can to get the violent people off the streets. Do you agree with that statement?
The problem with that statement is, in my opinion, and I think in a lot of the country's opinion, the violent radicals are the ones that are organizing these BLM protests, and are the ones that are the heads of BLM. So that becomes a lot more difficult.
So we don't have to get into detail.
With BLM, it's not a fringe thing. Those who are in power in BLM, in my opinion, apply to that. So there's a lot more in Black Lives Matter that fit that.
I'm not talking about how BLM started. I'm not talking about. Hold on. I'm not talking about who started it. I'm not getting into the details about who in the BLM movement. Maybe it could be organizers, maybe it's not. I don't know. And quite frankly, right now in this moment, speaking this, I don't care. All I'm simply talking is in very general and generic terms, and I'm going to read this statement one more time, and I hope you can agree to this because it's a very general statement, just like the statement I made about police. I'll read it again.
I heard the statement, Brian.
There are some violent radicals taking advantage of the BLM movement. Now, notice in that statement, I'm not saying who they are, whether they're running the BLM movement, and I don't care right now. The fact is that they're there. And I'm acknowledging that they're there. And all I'm saying is the majority of those who are part of the BLM movement, that could be anybody. That could be a 15 or 20-year-old sitting in his house, going out there protesting. It could be parents. Let's do what we can to get the violent people off the streets. And the majority of those in the BLM movement are not violent people. Can we agree on that without going into a prerequisite of specifics? Can we agree on that?
If that's the case, if that's the case,
all right, so you don't agree.
Let's do what we can to get them off the streets or to get them out of the movement, then the people who started and founded the movement would not be in the movement, Brian. It starts from the top with the leadership, just like it does with the president of the United States. The exact same logic applies to Black Lives Matter.
Okay, so again,
because the three women that started Black Lives Matter are trained Marxists who are for violence, who are for civil unrest, who think they need to burn the bitch down, so to speak, to get what they need done.
So again, you're going into more detail, and you can't even acknowledge what I said and agree with it. Can we agree on that? You
honestly,
will not agree with what I just said.
I don't know if the overwhelming majority of those who support Black Lives Matter are not looting and rioting and causing problems. I cannot answer, but I know for a fact that the people who started Black Lives Matter and the organizers, the people that you see on TV, the people that you see in the media.
I know, I heard what you said. We're not talking about that.
They are in that fringe that you discussed.
We're not talking
and that's an issue. That's a huge issue.
I don't care where they are in the movement.
And that's why a lot of people don't support Black Lives Matter. I'm one of them.
All right, I'll say it again.
Okay.
I don't care where they are in the movement. I acknowledge that there are some violent radicals in the BLM movement. I don't care whether they're the organizers. I don't care where they are in the movement. That's number one. Number two, and this is what really gets me going, and this is what bothers me. You mean to tell me that you can look me in the face right now and say the millions of people that have protested throughout the country that agree with the BLM movement, that are on the side of the BLM movement, you're telling me that you think you don't know if you can answer the question that more than 50% you believe of people that are for the movement are violent people? Is that your opinion? Because I think that's absurd. You're telling me right now you think there's a chance, and you can't answer the question. There may be a chance that more than 50% of the people, of the millions of people that have protested, you think there's a chance that the majority of them could be violent people.
No, keep in mind, Brian, It's not. You're assuming that every single person that's protesting for Black Lives Matter is African American, and that's not the case.
I didn't say that. I didn't say that. Why are you saying that?
There are a lot of very violent Caucasians that you see all over the internet who are committing these crimes and causing these problems.
All right,
associated with Black Lives Matter. I honestly can't answer that question, Brian, because the leadership of Black Lives Matter is what you're discussing,
JD,
and that's the issue.
JD, I never said assuming. All I said was people who support the BLM movement. I didn't put a color to it. So again, I have no idea why you're bringing that up. It has nothing to do with my question. I'll say it one more time because I'm shocked once again here. I guess I shouldn't be. You're telling me that you can't answer a very simple question, which is, of the millions of people, notice how I said people. I didn't say black people. So again, I don't know why you just said that. I never said that. You think of the millions of people that have protested throughout the country. This is a very simple, fundamental question. Of the millions of people that have protested throughout the country, you're telling me that you're not sure if more than 50% of them, over 1 million people, are violent people?
I would hope not, Brian.
I'm not asking you what you hope.
I honestly don't.
This is a logical question.
And I don't know. I would hope not. I would hope that that's not the case.
Let me ask you a question. Do you think more than 50% of police officers are horrible, bad people? And
absolutely
racist?
not.
Okay, so let me ask you this question then. Why is it that
not even close?
Okay, so good. I'm glad you made my point for me. So let me ask you this then. Why is it that we judge a demonstration by its most violent participants, but we do not judge a police force by its most violent cops? Why is that, JD?
Brian, there's 670,000 police officers nationwide.
And there are millions of people that are protesting throughout the country.
And there have been, I believe there was 170 people that were killed. Actually, I could show you a list of Caucasians that were killed unarmed by police officers last year. There's like 15 or 20 of them.
Okay, so can you answer
the chance of being killed by a police officer is extremely low during an arrest.
How many people have died during these protests?
No matter what race you are.
How many people have died in the city?
It's not about just death. It's about damage to businesses.
So I'll ask
it's
you
about
again.
looting. It's about, I mean, how many? I'll tell you this.
I didn't say there wasn't looting.
Over 1,500 police officers have been injured.
Okay, so you're not answering my question.
Protests.
Okay, so you're not answering my question. So I'm going to ask it again because I think it's a very important question. I asked you, would we judge police officers?
I'll put it this way.
Let me just finish.
I'll put it this way, Brian. I believe there are significantly more bad members of Black Lives Matter who have the wrong intentions in mind than I do. There are bad police officers.
Okay, but we don't judge an entire police force based on some bad cops like Officer Chauvin, right? So why should we judge these? Hold on. So why should we judge, and it is a small percentage, that's a fact, why should we judge a small percentage of the millions of Black Lives Matter protesters and judge the entire group?
Because of the leadership, Brian.
And you don't think you think there's good leadership in Minneapolis in the police department there? You think there's good leadership?
So now you're trying to turn this around to support your point because it's so weak. You're saying that
my point is weak.
You're saying that leadership. You're saying that leadership nationwide for police officers is bad. Is poor. Do you know that
you're the one who's talking about the BLM leadership?
Do you know that the majority of police chiefs in Democratic cities are African American?
There you go.
Are you aware of that fact?
There you go with the Democratic stuff again. Okay, so obviously we're not.
Well, that's where a lot of this violence is taking place. It's not taking place in Republican-led cities, Brian. That's just a fact.
Obviously, I know you want to blame all Democrats. So obviously,
I'm not blaming all Democrats.
Obviously, we can't have a basic, logical, fundamental agreement that yes, there are violent radicals in the BLM. I don't think any reasonable person would disagree with that. I also don't think any reasonable human being would agree that the majority of the millions of people that have protested, the majority of the millions of people that have protested in these BLM protests are not violent people. The fact that you can't say and you're not sure is extremely troubling to me and unfair.
It's not unfair.
So there's a million violent people protesting. That makes a lot of sense.
The reason I say that is because BLM was started under radical pretenses by radicals. The leadership is radical, and the people that you see,
not talking about the leadership.
The people that you see,
not talking about
that are heading these organizations, that are heading a lot of these protests.
I'm not talking about the leadership.
Radical. That is not the case with the police department. Brian, my answer would be totally different if the people that started BLM were not radical.
Okay, I'm not.
If they were not Marxist.
I'm not talking about. That's not the question. That wasn't the statement.
If they discuss things like David Dorn's death and the black-on-black crime that's taking place all over the country right now, they don't. All they focus on is African Americans that are killed by police officers, and in most cases, the African American is committing a crime.
Okay, so I'm glad you brought that up.
And has an incentive to resist arrest because their crime record is so lengthy.
I'm so glad you brought that up because, and I'm very saddened, by the way, that we couldn't agree on the most fundamental things that I wrote down.
I really can't answer that question honestly because I don't know the answer.
I kind of assumed that would happen.
Okay, that's fine,
and I'm extremely disappointed, I guess would be the word, but I guess not surprised.
Okay.
Because I've talked to some Republicans and some people way on the right that even agreed with this statement. But, okay, whatever. Obviously, we're not going to agree on it. I'm not surprised. But, you bring up something interesting. You bring up Dorn, and you bring up, some of the black-on-black crime, which I've, a lot of Republicans like to bring up these days. And I was speaking I was speaking to some black friends over the weekend, because I knew you were going to bring that up, because that's what Republicans bring up all the time. And their response is as follows. Here's the difference. Hold on.
It's not about being a Republican,
okay,
Brian.
If I could just finish. Yes, it is.
It's about right and wrong.
Yes, it is.
No, it's about right and wrong.
And here's right and wrong. So maybe you could learn something here, in my personal opinion, in speaking to some of my friends. Here's the difference. The fundamental difference between black-on-black crime and what some of these police officers have done. The fundamental difference is this. In most cases with black-on-black crime, like Officer Dorn, people have been brought to justice. Those black people who have committed those crimes have been brought to justice. They are behind bars right now in most cases. But when you look at the history of policing, and yes, I understand Officer Chauvin right now is behind bars, but when you look at decades and decades of policing, you look at what took place with what was the lynching where 3 people now were behind bars, the Ahmaud Arbery situation.
Yeah.
For 2 months, that was put underneath the rug. Mm-hmm. For 2 months, there were no arrests. And the only reason why, and they knew exactly what happened. They had the video. They knew what happened. But those people were not brought to justice. Why? Why is it?
I totally agree with you on that.
Okay, so hold on.
I would say that was systemic racism within that police department.
Okay,
but I don't think that what exists there in that particular county, Brian, keep in mind that's one county of 3,140 counties in the country.
For decades and decades.
I don't think that something like that is happening all over the country.
Okay,
I don't think there is rampant systemic racism.
With you. Okay, so I disagree with you, but if I could finish
if you think there's systemic racism in the police department, then you think police officers are bad.
I disagree with you.
Okay.
And the reason why I do is the facts speak louder. For decades and decades, when we have had circumstances and we haven't had cell phone video of police officers doing bad things, you cannot tell me that there has been the same amount of accountability with police officers over decades and decades and the same type of justice for them as there would be for African Americans that commit crimes. For the most part, when an African American commits a crime, they're arrested and they're brought to justice. But for decades and decades, police officers have not been brought to justice. And hold on a second. There hasn't been the same accountability for police officers as there have been for just regular African Americans. You disagree with that?
When a police officer is attacked by someone, if you look at, just go back to the cases I mentioned. In 2019, there was I can remember at least 10 off the top of my head, where the person and these are all Caucasians, they were all unarmed, they all died. They either tried to choke out the police officer, they kept walking towards them when they were asked to stop walking. Police officers, when they are attacked, over the years have definitely had the right to shoot to kill, and they have not been prosecuted for that. Now, that the question, should that be the case? I don't know. Do I think there should be police reform? Absolutely. Of course there should. There's definitely bad apples in every single profession, Brian, but I don't think that there is some type of uneven situation with police. Now, what there could be a situation of is the protocol not being consistent. That could be this, because right now, if I'm unarmed and a police officer pulls me over and I'm a big guy and I keep approaching him and he fears for his life, just based on what I've read, he could shoot me even though I'm unarmed because he felt that he was in fear for his life. And nothing would happen to him. And that's the situation with a lot of the cases that I mentioned from 2019 that were all Caucasian, Brian. It's not just African Americans.
So I'm going to read this again.
It's police officers being able to, if they believe their life is in danger, kill someone.
So I'm going to read this
and not have major recourse. The question is that over the top? Is that excessive? But if it is, that's not all about African Americans. It's about every single race in general that comes into contact with a police officer, Brian.
I've tried to be least biased as I possibly can.
Okay.
And I've tried to be as logical as I can when it comes to both sides of these issues. Like I said, there are some bad cops out there, but the majority of the cops are good cops. I truly believe that. But I want to get those bad cops and the bad policing off the streets, just like BLM. I believe that there are some violent radicals taking advantage of the BLM movement. But I also think the majority, it's not what I think, it's a fact, the majority of those in the BLM movement, the millions of people, are not violent people. Let's do what we can to get violent people off the streets. Like I said before, and I'll say it again, if we can't agree on those fundamentals, then it's very difficult to have a logical conversation. And I will also say, and I said it before, why is it that we can judge a demonstration or BLM by the most violent participants, but we don't judge police for the police
because
force
of leadership?
by
If I
could just finish, Brian. But we can't force. We can't judge a police force by its most violent cops. To me, that's the language of oppression. But let's.